In this episode, we'll take a look at the Sony ECM-674 shotgun microphone. Let's give you a sample comparing it to two other microphones that are in a similar price range, the Rode NTG2, which is about $269 US at the time of the review, and the Deity S-Mic 2, which is about $360 US at the time of this review, whereas the Sony ECM-674 runs about $299. The first one is the S-Mic 2. This is the new microphone from Deity. It runs about $350, $360 at the time of this review. This is a microphone that I actually quite like. I have it in my kit to a large extent because it is very rugged and it is waterproofed. So if you do get it wet, whether you drop it in water or it gets rained on or whatever, you can usually dry it out and within 24 hours or so, it should be back to operating. So that's a really nice feature. Next up is the Sony ECM-674. This is a microphone that I'm reviewing here. I have not used this microphone prior to this. And so I just wanted to give you a sample of what this sounds like. Again, all of the samples that you're hearing here, we've done no post-processing except to loudness normalize each of them to the standard for European broadcast television, which is -23 LKFS or LUFS. And then finally is the Rode NTG2. The Rode NTG2 is actually I would say a classic on the budget end of shotgun microphones, and it runs about $270 US. So it's a little bit less expensive than the Sony and the S-Mic 2, but roughly in the same price range. This is what this one sounds like. Again, all the same parameters, recording into the Zoom F8N. We have the high-pass filter turned off on both the Sony and the Rode NTG2. The S-Mic 2 does not have a high-pass filter. And this is what it sounds like. Of those three microphones, it sounded to me like the Rode NTG2 adds a little bit of low end to it, so it has sort of a broadcasty sound to it, which if you like that sound, then that's great. However, it can be a little annoying in some circumstances. The Deity S-Mic 2 was a little bit more neutral sounding overall, and then the Sony ECM-674 to me sounded relatively neutral with a little bit of mid-range emphasis as well. Just wanted you to be able to hear all three of those so you can make a decision for yourself on which you think sounds better. Remember that different microphones complement different people's voices differently. So this is not an exhaustive test. For those of you that are not familiar with shotgun microphones, their intended use is really primarily for outdoor dialogue recording and sound effects recording. However, you can use them indoors as long as you're working in a space that doesn't have too much reverberation. That is sound bouncing off the walls. And sometimes people call that echoey. Really, technically it's reverb. But in those circumstances, it can run into problems. That's not unique to the Sony. That's all shotgun microphones and interference tube designed microphones. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, perfectly fine to use indoors. If you're going to be in a really reverberant space, maybe not the best choice. We have some other videos over here that you may find helpful for finding an indoor microphone. The Sony ECM-674 has a super cardioid polar pattern. What that means is it picks up sound mostly from the front, and it generally rejects more of the sound from the sides. It'll pick up a tiny bit from the back. Let's use a little bit of white noise to illustrate that for you here. What I was hoping to show with this demonstration is A, it does definitely reject more of the sound from the sides and the back than from the front, which is what you would expect with a shotgun microphone. We used our mini rig here, which is a little USB speaker. The reason I use that one in particular is that it's very small, so of course I can move it around the microphone quite effectively, but also because it produces a fair amount of bass. So what I was able to do is actually produce a white noise that also includes bass. And what I wanted to watch for here is that as we move it around, a lot of shotgun microphones have trouble where they will reject a lot of the high frequency sound, but they won't be as good at rejecting the low frequency sound. So it looks like the ECM-674 does a pretty nice job of lowering all of it. So it actually works pretty nicely when you are trying to reject that off-axis sound. And here's a sample outdoors. I just want to do a couple of things out here. Number one, we've got a foam wind cover here. There's just the slightest of breezes, and really kind of illustrate that these foam wind covers, they're nice. It's nice that they included one with the microphone itself, but they're not really effective at blocking a lot of wind. So for example, well, it's died down now, but this, if there's any breeze, 5-mile-per-hour breeze, even 3-mile-per-hour breeze, you can pick up the noise that comes from wind. That is when the wind blows across the microphone capsule and you hear this sort of distortion. Also behind me we have Interstate 80 we're in Utah here, and we've got plenty of traffic back there, so I just wanted to set up the scene here first of all to show you how much this microphone can reject when we turn it away from the interstate itself. So actually I'm just going to stay within this frame and go ahead and start turning it. And a tractor trailer just drove by, and you can see that it's done a pretty nice job. Let me turn the microphone around again. And then back toward me. So it does a pretty nice job isolating. Here's a tractor trailer. And then away from it. So you can just get a sense from that, hopefully, how well this microphone does in practical circumstances in terms of rejecting the noise around you. The ECM-674 has a low-cut filter, which is the same as a high-pass filter. You'll see those names used fairly interchangeably. What that does for you is that when you're in a situation where you're getting some low-frequency sound that you want to cut out, it allows you to do that. And the nice thing about this one is that it's fairly mild, so it's really useful for dialogue recordings, whereas really aggressive high-pass or low-cut filters tend to affect the sound, especially of men's voices. This one doesn't seem to cut in too much, at least it didn't on my voice, and so I find that a really nice kind of balance where you can cut out low-frequency hum, a little bit of wind rumble, but you're not affecting the voice too much. I also prefer to use these types of things, low-cut filters or high-pass filters, on the microphone where they're analog versus on recorders that sometimes have digital high-pass filters. The reason for that is that when the sound makes it all the way through the analog stage into the preamplifier and then it gets converted to digital, some of the damage can already be done and it can overwhelm the preamplifier. So if you cut it at the microphone, you're not passing all of that additional rumble and noise in through the preamp and in through the analog to digital converter. So it's a better place to do it if you have that option. With the Sony ECM-674, you have that option. One thing that's important to consider as well is RF interference and the capability of a microphone to reject that interference. We did a test here with a cell phone. We used an iPhone XS Max. The name is getting really confusing. It's a XS Max, I believe it's called. And what we did is we had turned on all the radios, so we had Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, the cellular radio, everything was on. And we made a telephone call and also streamed some video. And what we found was that the Sony and Deity did great. They rejected all of the RF interference. The NTG2, on the other hand, did pick up a tiny, tiny bit, almost imperceptible, but it was technically there. So what I'm saying in the end here is that the Sony ECM-674, in my tests at least, seemed to do quite nicely at rejecting RF interference, which is something you do need to care about when you're working on film sets these days. We also did a practical noise comparison between the Sony ECM-673 and the two other microphones using a high-quality preamplifier and recorder. And one thing to keep in mind is that condenser microphones, like shotgun microphones like we're looking at here, have a tendency to produce more self-noise than high-quality preamplifiers and recorders do. So what we're measuring here is obviously ambient sound in the room. This is a pretty quiet room. I've got 3 sound blankets on 3 sides of me here, a blanket on the floor here behind me. I don't have a hard ceiling. It's actually bat insulation with a plastic covering over it. It will reflect a little bit of sound, but not much. We don't have a lot else going in the house here, so this is a pretty good test where we're not getting a lot of room tone, a lot of really stuff that's going to interfere. And what we found here was that the noise floor sat at almost the identical spot for all 3 of these microphones. When we loudness normalized them, they all sat right around -80 to -81 dB, which is completely usable. So all of these did really great, including the Sony. Condenser microphones, like the Sony ECM-674 and all shotgun microphones that I've ever used, require power of some sort. In this case, you get 2 options. You can use a AA battery in the body of the microphone itself, or you can phantom power the microphone from your recorder or camera. This is nice because you have options. There is one thing to keep in mind. If you do power with a AA battery, you do make some sacrifices both in terms of dynamic range and in terms of the maximum sound pressure levels that the microphone can capture before it starts distorting. You're still going to get very good performance even with the AA battery, and so it's a kind of extreme situations where that will become an issue. So for example, if you're recording a really, really loud concert, you're probably going to want a phantom power from the camera or recorder. If, on the other hand, you're just recording dialogue in a fairly typical situation without a ton of ambient noise, then I think you're going to do fine, even with a AA battery. It also comes with this stand/hand clip, which is really nice, so you can put it on a stand if you're recording somebody or a boom pole. You can also just hand hold it if you're recording effects outdoors, which is nice, and it also comes with this foam cover. Just like all other shotgun microphones, these foam covers are not going to save you in very strong wind. So you will still need to provide some sort of additional wind cover if you're going to be outside in the wind, but it's nice that it comes with the foam cover. It's especially nice to use those indoors. It prevents any sort of plosives from people talking directly into the mic. So nice that it's included. And just like all of the other microphones, this does not come with a shock mount. If you are going to be hand booming the microphone, you will need some sort of shock mount as well, so something to keep in mind. The one downside with this clip is that it does have plastic threads, so when you're mounting it to a metal stand, you have to be really careful with those threads. So overall, the Sony ECM-674, from my point of view, I couldn't find anything wrong with it, really. It's a great mic for its price at $299 US. I think it holds its own on pretty much every front. The only thing that one of these other mics outdid it on was the Deity Mic 2, which is water sealed. However, the ECM-674 has a high pass filter or low cut filter, whereas the Deity does not. So it's kind of a trade-off. Overall, I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.